feel like every conservative I know, based on what we know about these three choices, if it's one of those choices, has got to say, well, at least that's a good thing.
Oh, yeah. And, I mean, I have a number of friends who are similarly disposed towards Donald Trump as I am. I ended up not being able to actually hold my nose and vote for the guy. I just couldn't do it. Of course, I didn't vote for Hillary Clinton either. But for those who were sort of anti-Trump conservatives, ended up voting for him, over and over again, the justification that I heard was Supreme Court picks, and it was a justification that I completely understood and on some level agreed with. We knew that Hillary Clinton would pick bad, liberal, progressive, breathing, living Constitution-type justices. And there was at least a significant hope that Trump would keep his promise on putting conservatives on the bench. And so if that is what he does, I'll be the first person in line to praise him. In fact, I made this pledge on Greg Gutfeld's show on Fox just before the new year. If Trump appoints a young constitutionalist to the Supreme Court, I will put on one of those goofy red baseball caps for a day because this is such an important issue. And the list of names, 20-some-odd names that Trump had put out, looked pretty good to me overall. I've been advocating for Senator Mike Lee. I thought he would have been an excellent choice. I still believe that. But again, of these three names, they're all consistent judicial conservatives with established records, all under the age of 55, well-respected folks. I'd be very happy with any of them.
What are your thoughts on the latest immigration and security measures, Guy?
Well, I want to see sort of some of the details. And again, these are executive orders, some of which Charles Cook at National Review is writing about this a little bit. Some of this stuff is just putting in writing, we intend to enforce laws that already exist. And I think some of it's just kind of a declaration. I'm not saying that there's no legal weight to these things, to their presidential executive orders, but to some extent, I think these are also kind of messaging documents on some level, with the president coming out very early on in his term and saying, hey, remember all that stuff I said during the campaign and the major themes on policy that I would talk about? I meant it, and here I'm going to start codifying some of it, at least at a preliminary level, with some, presidential imprimatur. So the fact that he's, the wall and taking a look at pausing the refugee influx from certain countries that have issues with terrorism and could be difficult to vet. I mean, none of these should be surprises to anyone. These were common refrains during the campaign, and obviously I want to make sure that we take a look at these executive orders and make sure that they are legal and constitutional. The beef with Barack Obama and his executive orders was never that he was doing too many of them in terms of a raw numbers game. The numbers don't matter. What matters is he acting within his authority, or is he usurping authority that is under the Constitution delegated to other branches, particularly Congress? That was the crux of conservatives' critiques of President Obama. So with liberals saying, all of a sudden Republicans are fine with executive orders, it was never the existence or even the number of executive orders. It was the content of the order. So that's what we need to be consistent about and make sure that Trump doesn't overstep his bounds. But, again, what's going to mostly sway this stuff ultimately is going to be legislation. And the good news for Donald Trump is he's got a Republican Congress prepared probably to move significantly on a number of his agenda items, and I'd imagine that's a significant topic of conversation, recurring topic of conversation at the party's retreat, which is underway right now in Philadelphia.
Guy Benson is townhall.com's politics editor. He is also a Fox News contributor and author of End of Discussion, available on Amazon.com right now. Guy, always a pleasure, my friend. Good to talk to you.
Thank you, Buck. Talk to you soon.
Sponsor this hour is SilencerShop.com. Silencer Shop is the place to go, the place you can trust to handle the process of buying a silencer quickly and correctly. They submit lots of these forms. They know exactly what they're doing, and they'll make sure that your form gets processed as quickly and efficiently as possible. And you can pick out from their fantastic selection. They've got great prices, wonderful customer service. This is the place to go for a silencer for your firearm. SilencerShop.com allows you to simply pick it up at a local dealer. No transfer fees and no shipping. So check it out, team. SilencerShop.com. Again, that is SilencerShop.com. Help make the world a quieter place. And we will be right back.
Buck Sexton, the Blaze Radio Network.
You're listening to the Buck Sexton Show.
Team, we're joined now by Peter Brooks. He's a senior fellow for national security affairs at the Heritage Foundation. Peter, really appreciate you calling in.
Good to be with you.
All right, can we start with the Trump executive order on refugees, the pause in refugees? He hasn't signed it yet, right? But is saying he will. What do you think about all this?
Well, I mean, there's a draft floating around, and I have an op-ed on my screen right here, and I'm waiting to see when it's happened. And I heard it was going to happen yesterday, and then today, and maybe tomorrow, and then next week. So, to my knowledge, it has not been signed. And what it really is, it seems to me, is to be taking a pause to review all the programs for entry into the United States from some troubled parts of the world, Syria. In North Africa, and including a number of countries. And it doesn't say it's going to end up this way, but he's basically asking for his lieutenants to go through and look at the policies and the programs and the procedures to make sure that we don't have folks who would do us harm get into this country.
What do you say to those who will call this both ineffective and, yes, they will say it, un-American, that a pause in refugees from, I think it's 7 countries, would fall into those two categories? I'm sure you've heard that opposition already, Peter. What's your take on that?
Well, I think it's ridiculous. I mean, just putting, just a pause to check to make sure we're doing everything we need to do. Now, the draft I've seen, which may not be the final draft, talks about things like getting biometrics in there, so somebody can't come into the United States in using some sort of disguise or bad documents. It looks at enforcing, visa programs to make sure that nobody comes in here. I mean, I think what they're worried about is they've seen in Europe, where some of the terrorist attackers we've seen there have come in with the migrant flows, have come in posing as refugees. And I think the president wants to stop that. I mean, we're in unprecedented times here, and I would want people to look at that. And what the president is doing is totally defensible, in my view, especially as you look at the Islamic State. And this is one of the things I'm trying to point out in my Boston Herald column. I mean, ISIS is in crisis. There's a lot of pressure on it in Mosul. There's a lot of pressure on it in Raqqa. It's going to splinter, and all these thousands of foreign fighters are going to go somewhere. Probably some of them are going to stay and fight, trying to find places in Syria and Iraq where they can do that. Others are going to try to return home. A lot of them are out.
What are the
Europe.
actual changes that you've seen in the draft, Peter, with regard to extreme vetting, as it's now being referred to by pretty much everybody?
Yeah, well, they're talking about doing that, and the president's really just asking for a report. This is an 8-page document. The one I've seen, like I said, I could be behind the power curve here. This is the one that's floating around. I'm not sure how it got out of the administration, but it seems to be reasonable, and it's somewhat legalistic. In fact, to run down the 8 countries or 7 countries they're talking about, you have to go to 2 different sets of documents, laws, to run those down, because those countries are not mentioned at all. So what he's really doing is asking for recommendations on this. How do we go? What are the best practices for doing this? And here's 90 days, and get back to me and let me know what you're thinking at that point. So I think it seems very reasonable to me, considering the environment that we're operating in. I mean,
is there an argument that you think could? I'm sorry, Peter. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, please.
I was just going to say, is there an argument to be made that by making the vetting procedure better, it opens up the door to safer and perhaps even more effective refugee intake in the future, right? So that the next time a crisis breaks out, we're like, well, these are the procedures, we know how to do this, and we're not worried about infiltration by terrorist groups? Or do you think that's getting a little ahead of the skis?
No, I mean, why would you be against better policies, programs, procedures, or better practices? I mean, this could be, that I doubt this scourge of terrorism is going to disappear overnight with, the fall of ISIS. Al Qaeda is still out there. They're going to want to fill that. They're going to want to fill that space. But there's other things. I mean, this could, apply to criminals. It could apply to others. I mean, illegal immigrants. I mean, there's all sorts of things. I mean, my understanding, I'm not an expert on immigration, but my understanding is that not all illegal immigrants come over the border. Some of them fly in. I mean, they have to come over some sort of border, but I mean, they're not coming over the southern border. They're flying in. I mean, I'm not sure if that's correct. I've heard that. So this is getting better on the entry system and exit system for the United States. I think is worthwhile looking at, and we have a new president in. I mean, this is a new chapter, and I think if I were taking over the Oval Office, I'd want to have a lot of programs looked at to make sure that they're supporting and advancing American interests.
There is no real constitutional issue here, right? You hear people say that as well, that this is against American values and this is presidential overreach. The president can decide for national security reasons that any foreign alien person is barred from the country, and there's a long-standing history of that, actually. This is not new.
Well, I'm not a constitutional scholar. I don't know if you are, Buck, but, I think,
I play one on radio.
Yeah, well, a lot of these documents start out with the phrase "by the authority vested in me as president by the Constitution and laws of the United States of America." People will look at this; they're going to spin it any way they want, and they will, right? I mean, they're already spinning it. We haven't even seen the final document. I'm having a little reluctant to even talk about it because we haven't seen it, and I'm not sure if the draft copy I've seen is the most recent one. But yeah, people are going to say that. I mean, there may be issues here that are brought up in the judicial system. But that's our system, right? We're open to a debate. We're open to making sure that we're protecting and advancing American interests. And so I don't think anybody should be afraid of that. And that's part of the American system and what makes it great.
So we're going to have a piece to read of yours up on the Boston Herald soon. Is that right?
That's right, yeah, on this issue, depending on when they release this thing, because I do want to make sure that I'm correct. But the thesis I'm saying is, look, this is defensible considering what we're doing, what we're dealing with in the world. And the countries, when you think about them. I mean, there's Al Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula and Yemen. Sudan is on the state sponsors of terror list, as well as Iran. We know what's going on in Syria. We know what's going on. We know what's going on in Iraq. Libya is another country listed on there, and that's a mess right now. You have ISIS, you have Al Qaeda, you have a civil war. Some of these folks are coming from North Africa into Europe and places like that. So I'm just saying, take a step back and look at what we're dealing with from a national security point. And I think people will see this as a very defensible move by the president.
Peter Brooks is Senior Fellow for National Security Affairs at the Heritage Foundation. He has a piece already up, Donald Trump's Troubled World on Day One, BostonHerald.com, and look out for his next one. Peter, really appreciate you joining. Thanks for calling in.
Thanks for having me.
888-900-3393 team. See the way that Peter said thanks? It was like cheerful and happy, like he was thankful. I mean, Charles Cook is like my English brother from another mother, but we got to get him to get a little enthusiastic in that last little soundbite there. All right, team, more coming.
The Buck Sexton Show on the Blaze Radio Network.
This is the Buck
Sexton
Show.
Team, there's not been much coverage of this at all. I think this is fascinating. You have ISIS leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. As of 2 days ago, there are all these reports that he was critically injured in an airstrike in northern Iraq. This courtesy of the Daily Mail. They have ISIS leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi said to have been critically injured in an airstrike. Comes amid reports of a fanatic in charge of executing women has been killed. Abu Abdel Rahman killed by unknown gunmen in Mosul, security source claims, and he was assassinated by gunmen who killed him right on the spot. So if it is in fact the case, as it seems to be here, that Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi was injured, I mean, this is the most high-value target that we currently have in the fight against the Islamic State. Now, I know it isn't saying that he's dead. It's saying he's critically